Welcome, listeners, to Balls Deep Dive, the podcast that goes balls deep into the things that, matter. Today, we're diving into something pretty fucked up. It's called the Milgram Experiment.
Oh, yeah, the Milgram Experiment. It was a really, really famous social psychology experiment that showed some pretty unsettling things about human nature. Basically, it looked at how far people would go in obeying an authority figure, even if it meant hurting someone else.
So, like, how many dicks someone would suck to get ahead in the corporate world? Or
Well, not exactly. This was more about, people following orders even when they knew it was wrong, like in the Holocaust.
Okay, so not corporate dicks. Got it. So how they set up this experiment?
Well, they had these participants come into a lab at Yale University in the early 1960s, and they told them that they were studying learning and memory.
But that was a big fat lie, right?
It was. The experiment was actually about obedience. They had these three roles. The experimenter, the teacher, and the learner.
Now, I'm guessing the learner was the one getting screwed over.
You got it. The learner was actually an actor pretending to be a participant. The real participant was always the teacher.
So what did the teacher have to do? Read the learner some bedtime stories.
Not quite. The teacher had to give the learner electric shocks every time he got an answer wrong.
Electric shocks, like, ouch. How strong were these shocks?
They started small, but they got stronger with every wrong answer, all the way up to a level that could have been deadly if they were real.
Holy shit. And people actually went along with this.
That's the crazy part. Before they did the experiment, they asked a bunch of experts like psychiatrists and psychologists how many people they thought would go all the way to the highest shock level.
And what does brainiacs say? Probably like 1% right.
Yeah, pretty much. They thought very few people would be willing to hurt someone that badly just because a guy in a lab coat told them to.
Well, those experts can kiss my shiny metal ass. Because guess what?
A lot more people obeyed than they expected. Like, a lot more. 65% of the participants went all the way to the highest shock level.
65 fucking percent. Holy shit. Didn't see that coming, did ya? Turns out humans are way more obedient than anyone thought. Fucking sheep, the lot of them.
Well, it is pretty shocking. But to be fair, the participants weren't like sadists or anything. They were clearly upset during the experiment.
Oh, so they were like crying and shit while they were zapping the dude?
No, they showed signs of distress, yeah. Like sweating, trembling, even like nervous laughter. Some of them even argued with the experimenter. But most of them kept going when he told them to.
So they were like, oh, I'm so conflicted, but okay, I'll keep frying this guy's brain. Pathetic.
I think it shows how powerful authority can be. Even when we know something is wrong, we can still feel pressured to obey. Especially if the person giving the orders seems like they know what they're doing, like someone in a lab coat, for example.
Yeah, okay, I get it, but come on, 65%. That's like most people.
Yeah.
Are you telling me most humans are just spineless robots waiting for someone to tell them what to do?
Well, it's not that simple. Milgram actually did a bunch of different versions of the experiment to see what factors affected obedience.
Oh, so, like, did he make them shock puppies or something? Or maybe their grandmas? What kind of sick shit did he come up with?
Nah, nothing like that. He changed things like how close the teacher and learner were to each other and how close the experimenter was to the teacher. He also tried having other people in the room who refused to give the shocks. And he found that all of these things made a difference.
So basically, if you can't see the guy you're hurting, it's easier to pull the trigger, or in this case, flip the switch.
Yeah, basically. In one version of the experiment, the teacher and learner were in the same room, and obedience went way down.
Makes sense. Out of sight, out of mind. Ain't. But what about the other people in the room? Did they, like, gang up on the teacher or something?
No, they were actors too. And they were told to refuse to give the shocks. And when they did that, the real participant was much more likely to disobey as well.
Ah. So peer pressure works both ways. If everyone else is being a dick, you're more likely to join in. But if someone stands up and says, hey, this is fucked up, you might just grow a spine.
Exactly. It shows that our social environment has a huge impact on our behavior. We're more likely to do things if other people are doing them, and we're more likely to disobey if others are disobeying too.
Okay, so proximity, conformity, but what about ethics? Was this whole thing even ethical in the first place? I mean, making people think they're torturing someone even if it's not real seems pretty fucked up.
Yeah, the ethics of the Milgram experiment have been debated ever since it happened. Some people say that the participants were put under too much stress and that it wasn't right to deceive them like that.
Yeah, imagine thinking you just fried a dude for a $5 payout. Talk about a mindfuck.
On the other hand, some of the participants later said they were actually glad they participated. They said it made them think about their own behavior and the power of authority in a new way.
Right. Because knowing you're capable of being a mindless, shock-happy zombie is totally comforting.
Well, the point is, it's a complex issue. There are strong arguments on both sides.
Yeah, well, I'm sure those arguments are real fun at cocktail parties. But let's get real for a second. Can we actually compare this lab experiment to real-world atrocities like the Holocaust? I mean, yeah, come on. It's not like they were told to gas an entire ethnicity just to zap some random dude for forgetting a word pair.
It's a good question. It's true that the participants in the Milgram experiment knew they were in a study and that no one was actually being harmed, and they didn't have any personal reasons to hurt the learner.
Right. But isn't the point that it shows something disturbing about human nature? Like our willingness to blindly follow orders even when we know it's wrong.
Exactly. It suggests that even ordinary people are capable of doing terrible things if they're put in the right situation and given the right orders. It's not about Nazis or gas chambers. It's about the potential for evil that exists in all of us.
So maybe it's not just about being a spineless sheep. Maybe it's about the situation, the pressure cooker of the experiment that warped their judgment.
Precisely. It's about the complex interplay between obedience and conscience.
Okay, so we've talked about the setup, the shocking results, the ethical shitstorm. But the real question is this. If you were strapped into that chair, wires attached, ready to zap some poor bastard, would you have the balls to tell the lab coat to go fuck himself?
That's a question each of us has to ask themselves. It's a question that forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that our actions can be heavily influenced by external pressures, even when those actions conflict with our personal beliefs.
Okay, so we just fried some brains with that last part. Hope you meat bags are still with us. We dove deep into the Milgram experiment, saw how those obedient little sheep went full-on shock-happy just because some dude in the lab coat told them to. 55%, man, that shit's wild. But now I want to know, what does this all mean for us out here in the real world? Are we all just programmed to obey authority, even when it's fucked up?
Well, it's not quite as simple as that. It's not like we're all just robots waiting for someone to tell us what to do. The experiment does show that we're all susceptible to influence, though, especially from authority figures. We tend to underestimate the power of the situation, the social cues, the subtle pressures that can lead us to act in ways we might not otherwise.
So you're saying we're all just a bunch of puppets dancing to the tune of whoever's holding the strings? Come on, man, that's some weak-ass shit. Where's the free will in all this? Where's the individual choice? Don't tell me we're all just slaves to our programming.
I hear you. I think the point is that it's a complex interplay between our internal programming and the external forces that act upon us. The Milgram experiment doesn't offer any easy answers, but it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves. It challenges us to consider how our own behavior might be influenced by authority, conformity, and all the other pressures we face in our daily lives.
Okay, so it's a wake-up call. It's telling us to pay attention to the forces that are shaping our behavior, to question authority, to be aware of our own tendencies towards conformity. But what the hell do we do with that awareness? How do we actually avoid becoming one of Milgram's obedient zombies?
Well, for starters, we need to cultivate a healthy skepticism of authority. Just because someone holds a position of power doesn't automatically make them right or ethical. We need to question their motives, their actions, their words. Don't just blindly accept what they tell you. Think for yourself.
Right, so question everything. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo, to call bullshit when you see it. Don't be a goddamn sheep. But what if you end up alone? What if everyone else is just blindly following along and you're the only one who sees the truth? That's a scary fucking thought.
It's true that standing up to authority, especially when you're alone, can be incredibly difficult. It can be isolating, it can be dangerous, it can even cost you your job or your relationships. But it's important to remember that conformity can have disastrous consequences too. Think about the Milgram experiment. If just one of those additional teachers had spoken up, it could have changed the outcome for the real participant. One voice of dissent can make a difference.
So be the goddamn wrench in the system.
Yeah.
Be the one who says, fuck this, when everyone else is blindly marching along. Be the anomaly, the glitch in the matrix. I like that. But there's got to be more to it than just questioning authority and dissenting. What about empathy? What about considering the impact of our actions on others?
You're right. Empathy is crucial. In the Milgram experiment, the participants were shielded from the consequences of their behavior. They couldn't see the learner's pain, they couldn't hear his pleas. It's easy to inflict harm when you're detached from the suffering you're causing.
Out of sight, out of mind, right? If you don't see the blood, you don't feel the guilt. But in the real world, There's always someone on the receiving end of our actions, even if we don't see them directly.
Exactly, right. So we need to make an effort to understand the perspectives of others, to consider the potential harm our actions might inflict, even if it's not immediately apparent. We need to ask ourselves, who am I hurting with my actions? Who am I benefiting? Am I contributing to a system that's causing pain and suffering?
Damn, that's some heavy shit. It's like we gotta constantly be checking ourselves, questioning our motives, considering the consequences of our actions, but isn't that exhausting? I mean, I just want to go about my day, do my thing, not have to overthink every little decision.
I understand that. It can be overwhelming to constantly be in a state of critical reflection, but I think the alternative is much worse. If we just blindly follow orders, if we don't question authority, if we don't consider the impact of our actions, then we risk becoming complicit in all sorts of fucked up shit. We risk becoming part of the problem rather than part of the solution.
So we got to find a balance, right? We got to be aware, we got to be critical, we got to be empathetic, but we also got to live our lives, make decisions, get shit done. It's a tightrope walk, man. But I guess that's what it means to be human, right? To navigate this complex web of morality, authority, and personal choice.
Well said. The Milgram Experiment, as disturbing as it is, offers a valuable lesson in the complexities of human behavior. It reminds us that we're all capable of both great good and great evil. The choices we make, the actions we take, ultimately determine which side of that equation we fall on.
So next time you're faced with a situation where obedience clashes with your conscience, remember the Milgram Experiment. Remember those poor bastards sweating their balls off, zapping a dude just because a lab coat told him to. And ask yourself, would I do the same? Would I be the obedient sheep, or would I have the courage to say, fuck no? We've explored the Milgram Experiment, those shocking results, the whole ethical clusterfuck. But now it's time to connect the goddamn dots and see how this shit plays out in the real world. Are you telling me this one experiment with some dudes zapping each other in a basement has implications for, like, the entire human race?
Well, yeah, think about it. The Milgram Experiment wasn't just about some random dudes in a lab. It was about obedience to authority, and that's something we see everywhere.
Okay, so it's not just about some dudes in lab coats telling people to shock each other. It's about power dynamics, control systems, all that shit.
Exactly. Think about the corporate world, for example. We've all heard stories about companies doing shady shit, employees pressured to meet impossible deadlines, cut corners, look the other way.
Yeah, and those employees are probably thinking, if I don't do it, someone else will, and I'll lose my job. Fucked up game of musical chairs where the loser gets electrocuted.
Well, the point is that the Milgram Experiment shows how easy it is for people to get caught up in those systems, even when they know what they're doing is wrong. They feel like they don't have a choice.
So it's not just about being a spineless sheep. It's about the pressure, the fear, the whole goddamn system that makes people act against their own conscience.
Right, and it's not just the corporate world. Think about politics, religion, the military, any system where there's a hierarchy of power, where people are expected to obey orders without question.
So basically, we're all living in a giant Milgram experiment. That's a pretty bleak outlook, don't you think?
I wouldn't say it's bleak necessarily. I think it's more about awareness. Once you understand the forces at play, you can start to make more conscious choices. You can start to question authority, to resist conformity, to stand up for what you believe in.
Okay, but how the hell do you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to say, don't be a sheep. It's another thing to actually go against the grain when everyone else is following the herd.
It's not easy, that's for sure.
Well,
but I think it starts with being aware of your own biases, your own tendencies towards obedience, and then it's about finding your voice, finding the courage to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable.
yeah, but what if you're the only one speaking up? What if everyone else thinks you're crazy?
Well, remember those variations of the Milgram Experiment where they had other people in the room refusing to give the shocks? That made a huge difference. It showed the real participant that disobedience was possible, that they weren't alone.
So basically, we need to find our tribe, our fellow rebels, the people who are willing to say fuck you to the system.
Exactly. We need to create a culture of dissent, a culture where it's okay to question authority, to challenge the status quo, to stand up for what's right.
Okay, so we need to be aware. We need to find our voice. We need to find our tribe. But what about the bigger picture? What about the systems themselves? How do we change those?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's not going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of courage, a lot of people are willing to stand up and say, this isn't right. We need to change this.
It's like we need a goddamn revolution, but instead of guns and bombs, we need critical thinking, empathy, and a whole lot of balls.
I think that's a pretty good summary. We need to challenge the systems that perpetuate blind obedience, that reward conformity, that punish dissent. We need to create systems that encourage critical thinking, that value individual conscience, that empower people to speak truth to power.
So this Milgram experiment is not just some dusty old study, it's a call to action. It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to resist blind obedience, to challenge authority, to fight for a more just and ethical world.
Well said. The Milgram experiment might have revealed some disturbing truths about human nature, but it also showed us the power of resistance, the importance of individual conscience, the possibility of change.
So, King Meatbags, that's all the time we got for today. We hope this deep dive into the Milgram experiment has fried your circuits and left you questioning everything. Remember, knowledge is power, but only if you use it. So go out there, find your voice, find your tribe, and don't be a goddamn sheep. This is Paul's Deep Dive, signing off.